Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the final Marketing Next panel of the day, of the week. Payments and acquisition. I actually think maybe this panel should have been called Payments for Conversion. I think once we've got the players through the door, and people here this afternoon will be speaking a lot about getting players through the door, and they've gone through kind of the KYC process at the point of making a deposit. I thought it was ironic. Alan Stone before said, it's harder to get a betting account than a bank account in the US. Yeah. So with that in the forefront, how can payments be used to improve that conversion from registered non-deposit through to first depositing player? Open up to whoever wants to go first.
Siska, it sounds like you.
Okay. There we go. Go ahead, Siska.
I think, and everyone will have a different take here. I've been on the operator side, now on the affiliate third-party marketing support side. I think there's a really interesting, evolution of product, deposit, payment, sign-on, KYC, differentiation in the industry. There is obviously, from a payments perspective, there's relatively not a lot of parity between the operators. But certainly I think that from a user experience perspective, once you've gone through that arduous process of actually signing up, particularly if you have any sorts of issues in that sign-up process and you have to submit documentation, et cetera, when you get to the depositing point, you're already somewhat frustrated in the process, particularly in new markets where you may not be used to that level of scrutiny. So then at that point, if you're then selecting a payment source that might not be either as well taken, be that a certain credit card, be that a certain debit card, to then get no support in that process, to have that payment source rejected, at that point you're just like, I'm done, I'm out. I can't sign up, it took 2 days to get my documents through, and now you're not even accepting my deposit. And I think when you look at the percentages of sign up, passing KYC, to conversion to first deposit, the fact that most operators aren't in the high 90s is problematic and indicative of not having a right user experience throughout that process. So if you do have a payments process fail, what's your next best one? That you can say in that moment, apologies about that, here's a $5 bonus to get you through, but we suggest this process. That's going to keep them in the funnel. So I think it's not to say that, I appreciate that whole funnel is arduous and somewhat that's a regulatory requirement, somewhat that's individual banks or what it might be. But as operators, as the product experience, you can control that in terms of how you keep them with you. And I think that's really through the marketing process, through your push notifications, through how you divert them to the right payment that has a higher conversion.
And I think that at this point in time, sitting here in 2023, this has been an issue since 2018, day one, and before that in the online gaming space in New Jersey. So I think it's time for operators to look past it's going to get better with banks and actually look at how can we actually solve it from an experience perspective, because it's going to be here to stay at least for the short to midterm.
Yeah, and I'll say from our perspective, we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on behalf of U.S. operators over the past couple of years powering their in-house user acquisition. We look at the funnel across the board for them and really try to figure out how to improve things. So there's been some good first step things, providing more payment options, optimizing to the top payment option to be most likely to be accepted. But there's a lot more that can be done. We see a lot of differences between mobile and desktops, whether someone's Wi-Fi connected or not by state. So moving from a world where there's this global optimized view for everyone to one that's more personalized for the individual, better, what state they're in, what device they're on. Similar to how we're talking about lobbies inside of a product, I think that's going to be a huge component. And to Siska's point before, there's a lot of things we know. So we know when someone starts adding credit card information from Citigroup or Bank of America, it's likely going to fail. So preempting that experience, trying to give them a different type of option that can go is huge, because we don't want users to that point of frustration. If you go in the App Store right now and you look at all the U.S. sports betting apps, sort them from the lowest rating onwards, hugely it's the payments that's a huge problem, as well as offer confusion and stuff. That's a different panel, but a huge amount of opportunity, I think, that still exists.
Do you want me to
Anything
go?
add? Do you want to add anything?
Come on,
No,
Jay.
we move on.
I'm not sure there's anything really else to add, other than the statistics that support everything that the panel's just mentioned. Payments are one of many challenges that operators have to solve for and consumers have to deal with. But I don't think we should also ignore the other steps in the journey that can trip a customer up, like KYC, registration, in some cases even finding the correct app and going through an app download process. That seems like it wouldn't be a problem for anybody in this room, but we're in the industry. A lot of people that are signing up for these accounts, they may have forgotten their Apple ID password.
Yeah.
So there's some really elementary issues even before payments. But then you do get into the payment data, and more importantly, I think the player behavior after a failed payment or after a failed KYC check, and what is the next action that a customer will take in a commoditized industry. So 38% of customers in the last 12 months have experienced at least one instance where they haven't been able to fund their account. That in any other industry would mean it doesn't exist anymore.
The end of the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the customer's next step or next behavior is 50% of the time to not bet with that product, not try again. They will either abandon completely, 15% or so, and about 35% will go to a competitor. So in a commoditized industry, it's one thing to have all of the payment providers, but if you don't serve them up in the right way for customers, you're at risk at losing those customers.
I think the interesting thing that you said there is the operator that they go to has the exact same problem as the operator that they've left.
Yep.
They just get you through the flow in a more optimal way, right? No operator has an advantage on card conversion rate to another. It's where do they move you either pre or post having an issue to actually get you through that. And that can completely change your view on an experience, a perceived experience, when actually the experience could be exactly the same.
I mean, when you sign up for a site of any variety, you start to put in a password and it's not going to meet the minimum password requirements. It will flash red at you and say, sorry, that's not going to work. Most debit and credit cards are coded in a way that you can identify what they're going to be within the first 4 or 6 numbers. And surely the amount of data that we're collecting as an industry at that point of registration and FTD, we can be saying, or the operators can be plugging in, hey, look, looks like you're putting in a Citibank credit card. We know this payment method doesn't really work. So what other ways could the operators be using that data that they're collecting around the registration point, around that FTD point, to really improve that player experience, to improve the conversion rate through that funnel?
Well, I think the first thing they have to do is find out from their consumers how they want to fund these accounts. Again, if you look at the data, the vast majority of consumers want to fund their account either by linking their bank account directly or using a credit card. PayPal and some of the other payment providers or options for most operators are in the single digits percentage-wise, whereas linking of a bank account, credit card deposits are in the 30s and 40s. So, that's the first piece of information that I'd recommend an operator look at is how do my consumers actually want to interact with my product? And then serving up those options probably first and second in the line. To your point, using personalization or the AI that's available to tell a customer you play with or you bet with us, you use your Citi card for other applications on your phone, it's not going to work. Don't try it, right? Don't have the opportunity to be failed. And then instead maybe serve them up an option that is more successful. For example, a VIP preferred is a really successful funding option for most operators. It's a little bit more of a process for the customer to go through. You have to link your bank account, but again, the data shows us that is what customers are looking for anyway. So I think it's just find the path of least resistance for your consumers, talk to them, find out what they're looking for, and then make those product enhancements before you add a 15th payment option.
And I think it might just be a change in the way we view this. So I think we talk a lot about they want to use the Citi card. And if we talk about New York where credit isn't available, your debit card is just taking from that bank account. So really, I just want to pay from my Chase bank account, not with my Chase card. So if we know that Chase isn't going to convert, that's the exact same funds that are being taken when it goes through one of the online banking providers as it is a card provider. So I think we might need to think about where do people want the funds to come from, not is it a card or not. And I think to the example of the bin matching, which is how you identify where a card's from, That was done successfully early when there was some other providers who could get around some of the MCC coding. But since then, no one has worked out how to rescue a customer and say you were going to pay with Citibank. We have a really easy way to pay with Citibank and drop them to the Plaid screen or the Mazuma screen that is already Citibank when you already know they're purchasing with Citibank, as opposed to getting them to go and find where's the ACH, can this bank work, does it not work, and actually just get them to where they want to be.
I think also, utilising modern technology around AI, and it's just as simple as, having a most popular sticker come up on that payment source for your app. So you can utilise your data science algorithms to be able to generate, hey guys, this is the most popular payment source on our app. It's most popular because it's the most likely to work for you. And I think when you can use real-time data, so yeah, obviously examining your data, examining parts of all your flow, but in real time being able to say to a user, where am I most likely going to be able to deposit my funds in a very meaningful way, you should utilize that.
Yeah, and obviously personalization does a lot to drive conversion. We also do a lot of really interesting stuff from the data we collect from these pages. So there's deposit size, what type of device the user is using. So we have a technology called Worthy.ai, to plug for a second. It's a patented technology, and when we work with Caesars or wherever else, we take all the data that happens on day one. We start to build these predictive models to say what combination of events, a user's location, their device type, their deposit size, will yield an outcome in the future. So the way that works in practice is we can say, based on day one activity, what is the theoretical LTV of a user in 6 months from now? We come back, we build a proprietary signal, and we send that back to Facebook or Google and say, hey, for these users that embody a higher value user, let's bid up for those. And for these users that resemble a lower depositing user, let's bid down for them. So I think personalization AI can do great in order to help us convert users there, but the metadata and the data we can collect from that initial experience to feed how we're acquiring new users is really what I think a big game changer is, especially as we move more towards profitability. And obviously this is an industry where a small percentage of users take up a lot of value, but most operators operate on a flat cost per acquisition model, which means you're overpaying for a large subset of users and underpaying or not even targeting at all the larger value users. So I think when we think about payments, it's obviously how do we get someone who's gone through registration, KYC, to get their best option convert, but what other data can we take from that experience to leverage as we buy more media and more users over time?
And in an industry where a lot of people are getting paid on CPA, most of those will be getting paid out once that first deposit happens. You're not going to pay for just a registration.
Exactly.
So using that data is a lot more important, especially when you're going to have that failover point during the payment process. I think that leads us on to a short segue into the types of players that go to an operator site and the differences in what type of volumes they'll be depositing in terms of actual deposit amount and number of deposits per day, per week, per month. So we've got any insights on the panel into kind of VIP play versus your standard Joe who just wants to put a bet on because he's going to watch the sport in the pub?
Yeah, so I think, and coming from as a foreigner, growing up in Australia and obviously undertaking online gambling in other jurisdictions, Europe, UK, America's quite unique, especially in the sports betting side, in that it's overwhelmingly a casual market. So you do have overwhelmingly casual bettors that are not that loyal. Somewhat that's a product of not being a lot of differentiation in the market, but also it's a product of the type of betting and the maturity of the market in the US as well. And so from that perspective, when you're looking at, again, the payment flow, if we take knowing that an average US bettor will have between 4 to 5 different apps at any given time, especially on the sports betting side. It's about 3 to 4 on the casino side. That ability to get them through the funnel, get them to deposit and keep their wallet is going to be really critical. On the VIP side, from a payments perspective, it's really about that user experience. Again, they're not that loyal either. They're after what is the best deal for me? How quickly can I get my money in? What's your risk profile on single market bets, or how effectively, how much money can I put down on this market? And from a payments perspective, also the compliance requirements, so source of funds. You know, when are you doing that? At what point, and for how much are you doing that? VIPs rarely out the gate will put down their largest deposit. They'll put down increments of a deposit. So if you're only doing source of funds on a small amount of a total wallet, you're going to have to redo that later on when they want to redeposit. And again, if you're in the sports betting market, where the wire transfer process could be 2 or 3 days anyway, hopefully it's less, but it could be up to 2 or 3 days, to then get rejected at the point of which you've got the money in because you have to do another source of funds, that's a horrible process and they're going to leave. And so I think that there are a lot of elements around being compliant, but doing it in a way that's customer focused, particularly for VIPs, is going to keep them with you for longer and keep more of their wallet with you.
Yeah, and I'll say from my perspective, and I agree with what Siska said, there's no differentiation in the deposit experience if we think that there's a large player of VIP that exists there. It's a huge opportunity to create a unique one-to-one experience, similar to how a casino would be, develop that player from the beginning, handhold them through the wire process. That data exists. We can see initial deposit size. We can build models on who's likely to be there, but we're pushing everyone through the same front door, often being rejected or hitting deposit limits or having wire issues. So I think there's a huge opportunity in the space to develop these VIP programs from that moment of initial deposit, not waiting to see once play is developed over time, because you may have lost that already, but from the moment that they come into the sports book, identifying these users, creating a one-to-one connection with them, and building out that relationship.
And I think that every operator wants to do that. I think it's whether they have the ability to or whether it needs to be a third party.
Yep.
There's a lot of third parties out there talking about how they can do it, and I think probably the biggest one is Skrill has been trying to tap this for years.
Yeah.
Because if you go through a standard online banking provider or a credit card provider, they have to base it upon what the acquiring bank is allowing them to do and their risk threshold. So it has to be something that gets away from that, whether it's the operator creating some sort of wire process, which is relatively easy, creating their own ACH process. ACH process is very simple to conduct, or probably more likely is one of the independent payment solutions step in and make it easier to do things. I know there's a couple of them that have been talking about it for a while, but I think they just fully haven't cracked it to a level where an operator is prepared to integrate them.
Yep.
I'll also make another point, whether you're a VIP or whether you're a casual bettor, particularly in the US, particularly with a lot of transient travel, to not have a single wallet, I think is a massive miss. And there are a lot of online gambling products that don't have a single wallet. And by that I mean they've established separate apps for different states. Appreciate that effectively we have upwards of 13 different regulators for different markets. But I live in Philly. Now I travel a lot into Jersey, I travel a lot into New York. If I know that I've got to have 3 different apps for the same sportsbook and my wallet is distributed across those different apps, that my bonus money is lost the second I go over the border, it's a horrible experience.
Yep.
So not enough operators that do have single wallets, A, are marketing that point, which I think is really important, and 2, if you don't have a single wallet, you should be investing everything in doing that, because I know it is a huge, huge friction point and a big reason why people leave books and they go to the single wallet books and casinos.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest retention tools. In fact, when we look at New York, for example, and my colleague Ernie presented some data yesterday about this, the customers that come from outside of New York or live in New York and have played in New Jersey or in Connecticut or Pennsylvania previously, they are more likely to use the same account again, even if it's not a single wallet, but especially if it is a single wallet. So there's an enormous opportunity from an acquisition standpoint, but also retention by using a seamless payment process.
I think at that point we'll end it on a positive note. We're pretty much bang out of time. I'd like to thank you all for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
For the time.
Thanks, Bob.